Hello, a good evening, and welcome to Novara Live. It's Friday night, and for a change, I'm hosting. I'm, of course, Bastani. Tonight, down the line, I'm joined by the one and only Helena, aka NoJustice MTG. Helena, how are we?
I'm doing very well. I'm extremely hot. It's now officially too hot today. It feels like I'm back in Las Vegas all over again. Although it is an absolute pleasure to join not only yourself, Aaron, but to join Novara today on quite a momentous occasion.
It is a very momentous occasion. Of course, we have just hit the 1 million subscriber mark. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on tonight. Big story. Before that, though, we've got Unite the Union suspends Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. I'll be speaking to Green councillor Mothin Ali. He's looking to win the party deputy leadership. A Novara Media exclusive on how UK lawyers for Israel pressurise NHS staff over support for Palestine. And, as we've already said, we've hit a little bit of a landmark over here at Novara Towers. Stay tuned for all of that. And of course, if you'd like to support our work here at Novara, you can go to novaramedia.com/support. The link is in the description below. We are building a new media for a different politics. Get on that train. We've got 14,200 paying supporters giving as little as £1 a month. Give as little or as much as you like. Now, before we start, we have an event coming up that you will not want to miss. For our next Downstream IRL, Ash Sarkar will be in conversation with historian William Dalrymple about how the East made the West. So join us at 7 p.m. on the 29th of July at Earth Theatre in Hackney. Again, you'll find a link to tickets in the description below. Angela Rayner could be the next Prime Minister. Right now, the bookies have her just behind Nigel Farage as the second favourite for the role. And if Keir Starmer doesn't make it to the next general election, it's quite likely the Stockport MP will be taking the reins. Until today, Rayner was a long-standing member of Unite the Union, as well as Unison and the GMB. No more, however. And that's because Unite's conference today passed a motion to suspend the membership of the Deputy Prime Minister. As well as that, the union passed a motion to reconsider its ties with Labour over the party's handling of the Birmingham bin workers' strike. That second motion underscores how bad relations have become between Labour and Unite over goings-on in the West Midlands. That's a dispute which the union says would impose as much as £8,000 of pay cuts on some workers. Quite extraordinary. Bin workers in Birmingham have been striking since January and walked out indefinitely in March, leading to piles of rubbish building up on the city's streets. Unite's move against Rayner is broadly symbolic, given the Deputy Prime Minister claims to have already cancelled her membership payments, although she was still recorded as being a member of Unite on the last list of ministerial interests published on the 29th of May. However, the threat to cut or further reduce financial ties with Labour is a big deal and could be deeply damaging for the party at a time when it needs to maintain healthy funds to fight off threats from Reform and the Conservatives and Plaid Cymru and the SNP and the Greens and the Independents. It goes on and on and on and on. And the background to all of that is that the Labour Party is basically broke. This year could see its membership fall beneath that of Reform. Indeed, that may already have happened since the party's General Secretary recently refused to disclose membership data to the party's National Executive Committee. A falling membership goes hand in hand with downward finances. According to Labour List, the party is unable to balance its books this year and will need at least £4 million to fight elections in 2026. So, no money, poor election results, challenges on multiple fronts, and now Unite are talking about withdrawing their funding too. And the sums involved aren't small. The FT reports the union gave Labour £400,000 in the first quarter of this year alone. Helena, I'm intrigued to know what you think about this story. There's two parts to it, of course. There's the symbolism of Rayner having her membership suspended as a Unite member. And there's the fact that actually Labour may be seeing a massive dip in financial support from a major trade union, the biggest private sector trade union in this country. Firstly, do you think Unite could actually disaffiliate? Secondly, will Angela Rayner care about all of this?
I mean, when it comes to the Angela Rayner part specifically, it remains to be seen at the moment how momentous it is. Now, of course, it's an incredibly big statement, but there's two ways that this could go. First of all, it could just be a shot across the bows, right? It could just be Unite essentially saying, "Oi, Labour, get your act together," right? This is the first warning that we're giving you about the breakdown in the relationship between Unite and Labour, which, to be fair, has been a long time coming. Or it could be the very first kind of creaking of this relationship and the first straw before the camel's back breaks, right? It really could be the first domino to fall in terms of the trajectory that we're already going in. I think that it's the latter. I think that it's closer to the latter than the former, but it could still go either way, because this isn't just anybody. As you pointed out, it's the deputy leader, but it's especially poignant given that she's the deputy leader who's basically the only one who has real ties to the union movement at all, who's in the cabinet. So most of the cabinet is full of Labour right types. It's full of people who are professional politicians who haven't held trade union roles, who have no relationships with the trade unions, and are there because they were previously parliamentary staffers or were people from think tanks or from charities or whatever. So none of these people have any actual deep ties to the trade union movement apart from Angela Rayner. So that being essentially the conduit between the Labour leadership and the trade union movement more broadly in the form of Angela Rayner, them going as far as suspending her from Unite, that's really big, because that shows that they are not here to play. They really do mean business. And the fact that I think that this means it's a really big breakdown rather than just a warning shot here is because why would they, if they still wanted to maintain some level of influence within Labour, cut ties with basically the only person who they can influence within the cabinet? So that's why I think that it is the start of an ongoing breakdown between Unite and Labour. And furthermore, there's obviously a material basis to the what does the Unite get out of being affiliated to Labour? Anyway, what do they get out of this? When it comes to the bin strikes, right, how can a Labour government, any government that even says that it stands up for working people, how on earth can they justify £8,000 pay cuts to some workers, right? That is beyond the pale, especially since it's a Labour council and affiliated trade union. It makes it all the more damning, what's happening with the bin strikes in Birmingham. Some of the people who work incredibly hard and do jobs that many of us would not want to do, seeing a Labour government wanting for them to accept huge pay cuts really is beyond the pale. But this goes further. It goes further than just the bin strikes, right? When it comes to the Labour Party's broader economic paradigm, when we've been talking about Labour's policy platform, we spoke with this with Carla Denyer when she guested on the show a month or so ago, that a bunch of workers who should be getting taken with the government in the green transition are being left behind. And a lot of these people are represented by people like Unite in the kind of industries that are going to go away as a part of that transition. You look at Grangemouth, for example. Unite, the union, have called out Labour multiple times over people at Grangemouth losing their jobs. And have Labour actually put in the stones to go and do some industrial policy to try and make sure that there are jobs and training and all the things necessary for a just transition for these workers? No, they haven't. And these are workers who really do want a just transition. They understand that their jobs are on the firing line during this transition towards a greener economy, and they want the government to provide them with training. They don't want to have to continue working for fossil fuels, but the government hasn't put up the stones to actually give the investment available to keep that stuff going or to give them somewhere else to go. So it's going to be another case of Port Talbot. It's going to be another case of the coal mines where communities have been left to rot because the government doesn't want to do industrial policy properly. UK Steel is another thing as well, right? When it came to the Scunthorpe Steelworks, also represented by the trade union Unite, they couldn't even do a proper nationalisation. They just had a government plan to essentially pay for the raw materials to keep the blast furnaces open while allowing Ginier to technically still own the company. They said Jonathan Reynolds was the business secretary, said, well, nationalisation might have to happen, but we don't want it to happen. It's like they're still living in this new Labour world where you can't do any nationalisation or industrial policy properly because that's not seen as serious politics. And whilst I can have at least some level of sympathy with a bunch of the people who said that New Labour were a product of their time, the world was neoliberal and they had to work within that paradigm to be successful, I would disagree with them, but I at least have some sympathy for that viewpoint. You look at, for example, in Australia, where during the neoliberal turn in the 80s, they had a Labour government, they had Hawke and Keating, and they didn't go as far as people like Thatcher, which is why they have better workers' rights and a better relationship between unions and politicians over there than they do here. And so there could have been a different change there, but at least New Labour were trying to do the things that they thought was politically feasible for them at the time. Whereas with the Starmerites, with the Labour right at the moment, they're shying away from things like nationalisation and large-scale industrial policy, not because they think that that's the world we live in, because it clearly isn't. We clearly are living in a world of industrial policy. Look at what happened with Biden and the Chips and Science Act and the tariffs on Chinese vehicles, for example. Even the most neoliberal country in the world, like the big bad boss of neoliberalism, the United States, even they are trying to do proper industrial policy, and we are lagging behind. And it's not because they feel like that's the world we're living in, it's because they just think of it being left-wing politics. They have coded all of their political policy in opposition to the left, and that's left them adrift in a changing world where policy should be radically different to what we've seen over the last 45 years. And that's another reason why they're going to fail and why Unite are less likely to back them. There's also another problem that Unite have in terms of being affiliated to the Labour Party. Lots of their members support Reform UK. This is a real problem. You had a member of Unite on your show a few months ago. Sorry, we had someone on Unite a few months ago. I think speaking to you specifically, talking about how there are loads of people on the shop floor who are being won over by Reform UK, who are trying to focus on different issues other than industrial policy, and whilst also looking towards steel nationalisation as well. We saw Nigel Farage standing on the lines with the steel workers during the steel crisis, and this means that there are probably plenty of Unite members who aren't wanting to disaffiliate from Labour just because they disagree with the direction of the government, but because they have moved their affiliation away from Labour politics more broadly. And that rise in support will only make it weaker as a link moving forward. And I will be interested to see what happens when Sharon Graham comes up for re-election, or if indeed she pivots towards more of where the base in the Unite the Union is right now.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about there. And I mean, we've got other stories to cover, but I think this is really key. On the steel point, it was very simple politics to bring the steel into public ownership. I've said this so many times. We're spending £60 billion a year on defence. The government wants to spend £100 billion on defence, and actually more, about £20 billion on what's being called national resilience, which will be the supply chains around the defence industry in this country, around £120 billion. Now, there is no point in having loads of aircraft carriers, loads of F-35s, and nuclear deterrent if the country literally has no steel production, literally has no microprocessor production, literally has some of the world's most expensive industrial energy. But the Starmerites, Keir Starmer, the people around him, the Labour right, they cannot put two and two together, because what that means is some kind of public ownership, and that's coded as bad and left-wing. Therefore, we can't do it. And it makes them completely intellectually unequipped to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. I've seen people say, Taiwan is a free market economy. Why can't we be just like them? Taiwan has TSMC, the world's largest microprocessor manufacturer. It's worth about $1 trillion, that company, slightly under. It had massive involvement from the state, the Taiwanese state, to build that company. It wasn't state-owned, but it had massive Taiwanese involvement. The same with Samsung and South Korea. Our political class is not ready for that conversation. If you want big industrial juggernauts like TSMC in the 21st century, you're going to need big involvement from the government. Let's stick with Labour, because there's been some pretty grim news on the economy today. That's because the Office for National Statistics announced an unexpected 0.1% contraction of the UK economy in May. That comes after a 0.3% contraction in April. Now, it's important to say monthly data generally should be ignored. It's a tiny snapshot, and there can be revisions. That's why I like saying focus on the quarterly data, the annual data. But this is 2 months and reflects changing conditions subsequent to Donald Trump announcing tariffs around the world, which of course include the UK. The OBR has already predicted that those tariffs would take 1% off the UK economy and eliminate Rachel Reeves's much vaunted fiscal headroom at a stroke. In other words, it's one more reason why Labour's sums won't add up, and they'll need to increase taxes, make cuts to public spending, or both. With the autumn budget being a decisive moment for this government, and maybe more than £20 billion worth of savings needing to be made, a shrinking economy is the last thing number 11 would want. But for the last general election, Labour's one policy position was basically, I would grow the economy. Do you remember? Keir Starmer, how will you fix the NHS? How will you help public transport? How will you clean up high streets? How will you get more policing? I will simply grow the economy. Only they aren't growing the economy, which isn't just bad economically, but it's also bad politically, because they literally have no tools available to solve any problems. Speaking of politics, also last night, there were 10 council by-elections that included wards right across the country in Bassetlaw, Woking, Hartlepool and Tewkesbury. Now, of course, that isn't a representative sample of the country. These are council by-elections with small turnouts. But nevertheless, something quite remarkable happened across those 10 wards. Because between them, Labour and the Conservatives won 0 of 10 wards up for grabs. 0. None. The big two. Nul point. Meanwhile, Reform won 4 wards. The Lib Dems won 4 wards as well. The Green Party, they got 1. And an independent triumphed in 1 too. And that comes after the May local elections when, for the first time in modern history, neither Labour or the Tories came first in a domestic national election. Helena, how bad will the autumn budget be for Labour? And are we living amid a collapse of the two historic parties of UK politics?
Well, when it comes to the budget, I think it will be unfortunate for them politically because they will be forced to put up taxes, and they should. They should put up taxes. We have still had taxes be too low for far too long, and people have gotten used to this idea of this kind of level of low taxation in this country, given that we've had either huge amounts of wealth being driven into this country through our bloated financial sector, then of course crashed in 2008, or through the colonial pipelines we had for a very, very long time. Other European countries haven't had access to this level of kind of cheap and easy money and cheap and easy wealth, so they've had to put up taxes in the time period, and so they have populations that are used to it. So they're going to need to put up taxes. A lot of people say, oh, there's anti-growth. But quite frankly, a bunch of the big problems that we have with growth in this country are due to the fact that our population is very, very sick. Our population is very unhappy and mentally unwell. And a lot of this is due to the fact that the public realm has totally crumbled in this country because of this dynamic, right? It's this aversion to having European levels of taxation that led to PFIs. And we're paying down those debts still to this day, which, you know, at the time was off the books. But all of those debts we have to pay down massively impact the ability to be able to finance new public spending right now. Essentially was the Blair government financing votes then at the expense of votes later. And now people like Keir Starmer and indeed the Conservatives beforehand, who also had a problem with public finances because of the strain that they were put under because of PFI debt, they also felt the problems with this as well. So there will be a need to raise taxes. People will politically not like it. And when it comes to growth, we just don't seem to have any kind of radical policy solutions that are actually going to do this, other than just, you know, change the fiscal rules to make it so that there's slightly more room for more fiscal expansion, which is fine. I'm happy with that. But clearly this isn't enough to be able to make things grow. And we had the kind of car crash slashing of taxes from people like Liz Truss, and that didn't work in terms of quick growth either. There's going to have to be much better policy solutions when basically all of the growth that we've had over the past 15 years has been from private debt consumption-led growth, because people haven't been paid enough, so they've had to essentially take on private debt to be able to afford to live, and obviously got broken apart during the coronavirus pandemic too. So we have a real problem with investment. We have a real problem with actual consumption in terms of people not having to take on private debt, because wages have been too low and in fact stagnant for far too long. So unless we have proper solutions which aren't just inflate asset prices again for cheap growth like we did during the quantitative easing period, we're not going to have a really strong plan for creating a new economy. And of course, I would like to see more state investment of the kind we were talking about earlier in terms of these kind of big international tech company, for example, that we can have as a jewel in the company's crown. I'd like to see something like this, but it's going to take something far more radical of that to really kind of deal with the terminal decline that the country's in. When it comes to the breaking apart of two-party politics in this country, well, it stands to reason. Tories have failed, and now Labour look like they're failing, and people are just looking to go elsewhere. And what's important to understand, at a time of political flux is incredibly important. Of course, the work at Novara that we do here is really important to be able to push the message out on social media, right? But when you look at the Sohran Mamdani campaign, I hate to bring up Sohran again, but it's just too important to let go on this. When people are looking for new places, coalitions are breaking apart, people will be won over quickly. And there's too much voice from the right of politics, both in the mainstream and in the AstroTurf media, that we need to be on the ground now. Now is the call for people at a time when there are local elections next year up for grabs, in which Labour heartlands, urban, metropolitan areas are all going to be up for grabs. It's going to be a real bloodbath. And if we want those to be able to go our way and not the way to somebody else on the right, this involves getting on the ground, it involves canvassing, it involves speaking to people and knocking on those doors. So there's never ever been a better time for left-wing organising than there is at the moment. So I would advocate everybody, no matter what your political persuasion in terms of which kind of party you want to join, to go out and start canvassing right now, because there are people who are looking for somewhere new to go, and we need to win them over.
I think that's really well said. And I think on the Greens, it's something we're going to talk about a lot over the next 12 months, really. Right now you've got a leadership election in the Green Party. And there are two kind of competing points of view, right? One is let's just build slow and steady, which I don't look. when you're a small organization and you've made really big gains, but they've been really hard won and they've taken a really long time, I get risk aversion. I get caution. I get it. But we're in a moment where Reform could become the largest party, or I think it'll almost certainly become the second largest party in the next election. They could become the largest party. We're looking at a moment where, like you say, Zohran Mamdani basically has the politics of like a Twitter ultra-leftist on many issues, is now the Democrat nominee to be the mayor of basically the capital of the English-speaking world, New York City, London. We're in a moment where that kind of old consensus is collapsing, and people like the Greens or a new party to the left could scale very quickly. And I think you're missing a huge chance if you're the Green Party and you're saying, you know what, we can just get 8 MPs. No, you should be saying, how do we get 30, 40, 50 MPs? And I wouldn't say that normally, actually. I'm quite into risk aversion and caution. But I think now it's completely unwarranted, because if you don't do that, like you say, Helena, the people that would have voted for you, the seats you would have won, they're not going to stay with Labour, right? That's not the downside. They go to Reform, or they might even go to a party in the future to the right of Reform. So you're really failing politically right now. You're doing yourself a massive disservice if you're not ambitious. Hugely important. Let's go to your comment.
On that point,
please go on.
On that point, I would like to point out as well is that actually I think there's also a problem with the Liberal Democrats too. There's a lot of young people. I spend a lot of time on TikTok for my sins. I do enjoy a bit of short form vertical video. There are a lot of young people, and the polling shows this too, who've moved from Labour to the Liberal Democrats. They don't know. They don't know the betrayal. They didn't live through the coalition government. They don't know what these people are like. I think it's really important that they have to be winning people over to a proper left-wing cause, right? We need to press upon people that Labour may be democratic socialist in name, but not in reality. The Liberal Democrats are the liberals that they purport to be. We have an Orange Book Liberal Democrat as the leader of the party right now. They're selling snake oil, and unless we try and get to them first, because we saw Lib Dems' ground campaign, they've got 72 MPs right now because they have an excellent ground campaign. So unless we meet people before the Lib Dems get to them, we may end up losing people from social democracy, democratic socialism, trade union politics to the kind of wishy-washy liberalism of the Lib Dems, just because they're Thatcherites who wave the pride flags around. So that's another important point too.
I mean, I would say, and I'll just finish with this, I don't even think the Liberal Democrats are a liberal party. The Liberal Democrats in a Labour seat, they'll go to Tory voters and they'll be like, we have to get Labour out, okay? We're not the Labour Party, vote for us. And then the Tory seat, they'll be going to Labour voters going, Labour can't win here, come vote for us. And I look at the Liberal Democrats as purely an outgrowth of the dysfunctions of being a major party within a first past the post system, but they don't actually believe in anything. They tell Labour voters, we're like you, kind of, and they tell Tory voters the same thing. And they don't, apart from proportional representation, they literally believe in nothing. This party's been around. You've had the SDP since the early 80s. Then they joined the Lib Dems, I think, really by the late 1980s. It's a coherent political project. They get a ton of MPs in 92 and 97. They've run authorities in this country. There is not a single thing that the Liberal Democrats, after 40 plus years, can say that they've accomplished. There's not a single thing. What have you done in local government? One thing. Go on, Helena.
They traded massive sanctions on welfare for 5p plastic bags, Aaron. And you say they have no successes.
Sorry. My mistake. We have a 5, by the way, it should be a lot more than that. 5p. I love it. 5p. If you go to Waitrose, it's quite funny, right? It's like 50p or something. Wait, hold on. I thought it was 5p. The Lib Dems always say it's 5p. Anyway, let's go on to our next story. Mothin Ali, speaking of the Green Party, is a Green Party member on Leeds City Council. He represents the Egyptian and Hare Hills ward. In July 2024, Ali rose to national prominence after he was filmed appealing for calm and trying to restore order after unrest broke out in Hare Hills. At the time, some of the right-wing press falsely accused him of participating in the violence. Last month, Ali made this announcement. He is, of course, standing for the Greens as deputy leader. He wants to challenge the party's middle-class image, so he threw his hat into the ring. The results of that race will be announced in September. Earlier today, I was joined by Mothin Ali, talking about a range of issues. I began by asking him to lay out his pitch for the deputy leadership.
So for a long time, the Green Party has been a very southern-facing, quite middle-class-looking party. I think it needs an authentic working-class voice, and it needs to represent the North adequately. We've got a lot of voters from the North. We've got a lot of voters from urban areas, and I think it's time that the party leadership reflected the voter base. Last year, we saw a huge growth in electoral successes in urban seats, in working class seats, and with the upcoming projection of next year's elections as well, a lot of inner city areas are going to be up for election. I think we need adequate representation. I think we need people who can speak to those kind of audiences a lot more, and on a level that people in those areas will actually understand and appreciate. I'm someone with years of experience working in accounting, finance, so I think having an understanding of working with small businesses and understanding their needs, and someone who can look at the internal party structure and finances and how to work out budgets. I think that's a key skill that seems to be something that a lot of people criticise the left traditionally for, and I think someone who has a good basis in economic understanding will offer a bit of reassurance on that front as well.
I know you're a counsellor now. What's your sort of professional background? What do you do alongside that? What have you done alongside that? You're talking about, aptitude with numbers. Where does that come from?
So I'm a chartered accountant. I'm from a working class background. I mean, my dad was a steel worker. I grew up in some of the poorest neighbourhoods in Sheffield and then in Leeds. But I ran a small business, or I run a small business, working for other small businesses. I'm offering accountancy services to them. I became self-employed because I was too ill to work and hold down a full-time job, so I needed the flexibility to be able to work around my health. So that's the reason I became self-employed a few years ago, and since then I've been working with and supporting local businesses and local self-employed people. That's before I became a counsellor. I've practically destroyed that since I became a counsellor because of the amount of involvement and time being a counsellor takes.
I'll get to the sort of political meat now. Actually, I think this is probably the most important question for anybody presently running for the leadership or deputy leadership of the Green Party. How many MPs do you think that the Greens can win at the next election? How many would you like to see?
If we look at our second places at the last general election, there's close to 40 second places. I think there's a good possibility of at least taking 20 of those. Realistically speaking, I think 20 should be achievable. I think we're going to try and target 30. So we'll form a good voter block. But personally, I think we could do better than that. I think we should be more ambitious than that. I think we should be really pushing forward, even with the first past the post system. I think we could really build on a grassroots, community-focused campaign in every single ward, much like we did in Gipton and Harehills when we won in 2024. But we just need that motivation. We need that local connection, and we need to learn how to mobilize grassroots teams. And that's one of the things where you ask what's my pitch. That's one of the things that I think I can offer is teaching people how to build up grassroots organizations and grassroots movements. I think that's going to be a real key thing in the next election.
And how do you think that the Greens have failed in recent years? I mean, lots of people have focused on the positives. I think they've picked up councillors in 8 consecutive rounds of local elections. Of course, you quadrupled your Westminster representation in the 2024 general election. Just extraordinary breakthroughs. Did really well coming third in the mayoral race for the West of England, a very close third. Maybe if there had been, eliminative voting, as is going to return for mayoral elections, maybe that candidate might have won, actually. But, we can talk about the positive stuff all day. Where do you think the Greens have gone wrong? And I'm asking that because, of course, you learn from your mistakes, and success is built on taking something positive away from failure.
I think the first thing is the lack of ambition. And I think back to my ward over the last few years, is we have this thing in the Green Party called Target to Win. And what we do is we campaign in areas that are selected as target areas. And what that does is it focuses a lot of resources, a lot of financial resources, a lot of people resources into one area and into one specific campaign. And I think that is good in terms of its workings, but I think it's really poor in terms of its scalability. I think not being able to scale that into several wards at the same time and running effective campaigns across several wards at the same time or in constituencies, um, not being able to do that on a lot lower budget, because if we look at some of the amounts of money that we spent for the MP wins, I don't think that's scalable as well. We just haven't got the money to be able to do that. So what we need to be able to do is mobilize people and motivate people without that money, without that people incentiveness. We have to be able to get the people in the community that really want to come out and support us and campaign for us and believe in us. And I think we've got the right strategies. I think it needs refining, and I think it needs to be able to be marketed properly to ordinary people.
Put some flesh on that. What do you mean? Do you mean a different kind of use of social media, a different approach with regards to national press, leveraging members in a different way? What does it mean?
So I think it means all of that, but I think the more important thing that goes beyond all of that is building people from the ground up. I'll give you an example, right? My ward wasn't a target ward, so the party gave me a small budget, which was half the budget of everyone else. It gave me no people resources, so I had to build my own team. But what we managed to do is we managed to motivate people on the doorstep. We went out door knocking. I went out knocking on next on pretty much every single door in my ward. People came out of their homes to actually come out and campaign for me. People wanted my banners up on every house. I couldn't make banners fast enough for people to get them on their doors and on their gates. So I think what we need to do is we need to have lots of leaders. We can't just have the Green Party leadership leaders in every single ward, in every single area. So we need to build capacity for people to go out and create grassroots movements just like mine that we did in 2024. There's one night that I remember, we do these postal vote letters for postal voters, but I've had something like 3,500, 4,000 letters to get out within a very short amount of time. And I was panicking. I was worried about how I'm going to do this. I've managed to create a group with about 500 members of the local community in. So I put a message out to a couple of people saying, look, I need some help. And before I knew it, they'd put messages out saying, oh, Mothin needs help. We need to come out and help him. And there was 100 people that had turned up. And within a couple of hours, we got out 3,500, 4,000 letters. And it's that people power that really wins elections. We need to have people on the ground that can create those teams of people, whether they actually join the Green Party or not. I think that's a side issue. I think what we need is people who are ready to get on with our message, see our message for what it is, be motivated by our message, and join in the campaign.
You're currently the councillor, as you've mentioned, for Egyptian and Hare Hills. One of those is a traditional white working class area. The other is more diverse. In a lot of the sort of media coverage of this country's sort of political sociology, that would instinctively lead people to say, well, there's a divide between those two areas. I mean, you represent those two areas within your ward as a councillor. Is that right? Or does the media overplay these differences between various groups?
People vote for people. People vote for people that they can relate to. I might have brown skin. I might have a big beard, but look, I'm a gardener. I teach permaculture. I'm Yorkshire born and bred. I lived in the houses that a lot of these people lived in. I grew up in we got really lucky and we thought we struck our fortune. Managed to get into a council house, and that was us, achieving something. So that's the sort of lifestyle that I grew up in, and this is the lifestyle that a lot of people in my ward living through. So they didn't see me as someone with brown skin or someone with a big beard or Muslim or anything like that. They saw me as one of their own, regardless of where it was, because we can speak to them. We can identify and we can empathize with the problems that they're going through. So one of the things that I always say is, look, we won every single ballot box last year. If there was that divide, people wouldn't have voted for me in the way they did. Do you know, we traditionally lost, we were about 1,600 votes behind in this ward. We won by 700 votes. We took a massive chunk from because we inspired people. So as long as people see leaders that they can actually get behind and they can believe in, I don't think ordinary people care what the badge they're wearing or what color of the skin there is or what religion they are. I think what they need is people who are bothered enough who care enough to go out and campaign and talk about the issues that they're talking about that they're facing. And if we can identify that level, I think we can be something really powerful.
So next year, next May, the Greens are looking to get past 1,000 councillors for the first time. And obviously a lot of that is going to come from traditional Labour places. Not all of it, but a lot of it. You've talked about wanting to get at least 20 MPs. All those second places, bar one, I think, from the last general election, are Labour seats. 39 of the 42nd places the Greens got in the last election were Labour, are Labour. So to that extent, you may be a harbinger of the future, right? A glimpse of the future for the Green Party, making these gains in traditional Labour strongholds. What's changed? And do you think that will continue?
I think there's a number of things that have changed. Is a lot of people are disillusioned with the main two parties, and especially Labour wards, is a lot of the inner city areas feel like they've been taken for granted. And that's where you get people like Reform who are on the far right trying to exploit that. And what we need to do is actually give them an alternative and make sure that we're giving them hope. You know, we can't just keep selling them on fear. We've got to give them hope. Labour campaign on don't vote, vote for us, otherwise the Tories will get in. Vote for Labour to keep the Tories out. When they don't actually tell us what they stand for. What is it that you're going to give? What is it that you're going to do for the people? What is it how are you going to change people's lives and how are you going to benefit them? That's the big missing. People want to hear that. People want a little bit of inspiration. We have this thing where people in this country are supposed to be apathetic. They're not apathetic. They're just fed up. People want to believe in something. People want to vote in something. People believe in the system, but the system has to deliver. And that's the thing I think that needs to change. Is we need to be a lot more braver in our messaging and make sure that we're talking to the people who really need to hear our message and make sure that we've got people on the ground that can hear that deliver that message. I think that'll continue in the next year, especially, and the Green Party itself needs a way of tapping into that. At the moment, I don't think it has the voices that can do that. Is the people who are on the ground. One of the things that we discussed quite a bit amongst people who won last year that weren't target seats was a lot of our votes come bottom up. Whereas if you look at people like Reform or people like the Conservatives or the Labour Party, a lot of their votes come from the brand, come from top down. Whereas we have to prove that we're worth voting for. If we can continue that, but we can get some of that brand recognition and votes coming from the top down, I think we could be onto something real powerful.
Yeah, something I hear a lot, which is, Green councillors are generally fantastic representatives because you guys have to fight for every vote. Every single vote has to be fought for and won. Obviously not the case with a national brand like Labour or the Tories or increasingly Reform. Last week, there was this pseudo announcement of a new left party, in so much as Zara Sultana came out and said that it will be co-led by both her and Jeremy Corbyn. I clarified some of the details around that. She wasn't saying anything which was untrue. I say pseudo-announcement because the party itself hasn't been formally announced. I think it's simply a matter of time. What does that mean, the possibility or the inevitability of a new left party? What does it mean for this leadership election within the Green Party, but also for the Greens electorally after it comes into being?
There's a couple of things there. One, at the moment, we've got to remember that this party doesn't exist. Okay. Yes, Jeremy Corbyn is an inspirational figure. He's someone who I take a lot of personal inspiration from. He was one of the speakers at the first demonstration I ever went to. The 2 million people in London during the Iraq War. I heard him speak. I heard Tony Benn speak, Michael Foot speak, and I took a lot of inspiration from that, and it inspired me to work within the Labour movement. But at the moment, I think there's no party. That party doesn't exist. There isn't an organisation that you can get behind. So I'd encourage everyone to join the Greens, obviously, because we've got a real powerful moment where we can have left-wing voices within the Green Party making a real change, having a real breakthrough moment, and changing things within the Green Party, changing the political landscape, not just within the Green Party. There are some strong voices in the Green Party, both in the leadership election and in the deputy leadership elections. And if we can make the right choices, if we can be bold enough to make the right choices, then we're onto something powerful, I think, for next year.
So if this new left party did come into being, which I think it will, the question is how successful is the launch? How does it do out of 10? Let's say it does 6 or 7 out of 10. It's going to win MPs, etc. It's a coherent national organisation. There is the seat of Keir Starmer, Holborn and St Pancras. Andrew Feinstein came second there in the last general election. Not too far behind Keir Starmer, it should be said, who only got about 18,000 votes. The Greens came third. Andrew Feinstein, of course, is one of the key figures within the formation of this new left party. If Andrew Feinstein was the candidate for that left party in Keir Starmer's seat, as deputy leader of the Greens, would you be looking to stand down the Green candidate there? Would you be supporting Andrew Feinstein to remove Keir Starmer?
Andrew Feinstein, again, another Goliath. His achievements speak for themselves. I've met Andrew Feinstein and I've spoken to Andrew Feinstein. I even asked him to join us. I'd love it if he would. Now, at the moment, our constitution says that we should stand in every seat. Do I agree with that? Not 100%, because there are figures like that. There are figures like Leanne Mohammed. There's a young lad in Bradford, Mohammed Ali Islam, who was very close to winning. He was about 500-600 votes short. I would love to take some major Labour scalps. I have this motto that I can win without winning. Right? I don't have to be the change maker. If something that I do inspires someone else to do the work, as long as the work's done, that's the most important thing. And if we can find a way of working together to beat reform, where we're not hurting each other, then that's what we need to be able to do. Because the only way that we're going to beat the far right, especially with the rise of the far right, not just in the UK but across Europe and in America, is if the left unite. We can't carry on fighting each other because we're not left enough, we're not socialist enough. All these kind of purity tests have to be put to one side, and we have to work on our commonalities because it's too important. The work's too important. We can't let little divisions keep splitting us apart. So yes, I would love to work with Andrew. I'd love it if he joined the Green Party, but if he's not going to and he wants to go with this new party, great. We've got to find a way of working together. So the ideal way would be a joint ticket. We don't have to go in as the new Jeremy Corbyn party or the Green Party. We can go in as a joint ticket, sort of like Labour and Cooperative Party do. We can go in on a joint ticket, and that'll probably be the easiest way constitutionally for us to get around our constitutional requirements. But I'd love to work together.
Interesting times. Mothin Ali, thanks so much for joining us and best of luck on the campaign trail.
Aaron, really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll get a signed picture.
Well, I'll come up and see you soon, I have to say. It's been too long.
Yeah. Nice one.
Cheers. We've got a Novara Media exclusive for you now, and it's one that started with a tip from a member of our audience. Novara's very own Harriet Williamson reveals how pro-Israel lawyers threatened an NHS Trust over Palestine badges, telling staff that wearing a watermelon pin made them, quote, a poor role model. Naughty you, a watermelon pin of all things. The story begins with correspondence seen by Novara Media between the organisation UK Lawyers for Israel and St Bart's Health NHS Trust. This is from our report. A UK LFI, that's UK Labour, UK Lawyers for Israel, said Bart's Health NHS Trust was, quote, criminally liable for allowing what the hell is going on? What is going on? Criminally liable for allowing nurses to wear badges with symbols of Palestinian solidarity on their lanyards. The UK LFI accused Barts of breaching Section 29 of the Equality Act 2010 because allowing watermelon or Free Palestine badges harasses patients and is, quote, also likely to harass Jewish or Israeli staff at the hospital. No Jewish or Israeli staff was cited as making a complaint. Naughty you, you're wearing a you've broken human rights law, you're wearing a watermelon, piece of fruit is pinned to your chest. Go to jail. And they're not saying that, but I'm talking figuratively. Where does it end, by the way? In another letter, they reported a patient complaint. It outlines a complaint from a Jewish maternity patient who felt, quote, extremely vulnerable and, quote, panicked because 2 members of staff were wearing Free Palestine badges and one a watermelon badge. The patient said it was a reminder of the increasing threats against the safety of Jewish people, quote, but then confirmed that her care had not been impacted at all, which is kind of the important thing. The letter states, quote, the patient stresses that she had excellent care from these individuals and they were very kind. But that does not detract, their actual conduct doesn't detract from how she felt, but that does not detract from the fact that wearing the badges is inappropriate in a patient-facing workplace. The nurses wearing badges were a poor role model for others, the letter read. In response to the letters, the Trust updated their uniforms policy on the 18th of March this year, banning political symbols. But on the 10th of March this year, a full 8 days earlier, staff were made aware of the policy change because UK Lawyers for Israel were already celebrating their victory on their website. As a result of the change in policy, 3 NHS staff members are now taking legal action against the Trust. One of them is senior nurse Ahmed Baker, a British Palestinian employed at Whipps Cross Hospital. Baker alleges that he was threatened by a very senior member of the Trust with disciplinary action for refusing to remove, wait for this is extraordinary, a virtual Microsoft Teams background of a still life painting featuring a watermelon. I was threatened with disciplinary action because I support what's going on in Gaza. I support the Palestinians. Is it even, I don't want to see kids mutilated. Is it even supporting anybody? I don't want to see 16,000 kids killed. It's not supporting a side. It's supporting peace. What did you do? Did you have a banner of Yasser Arafat behind you? A PLO slogan? No, I had a watermelon. Honestly. By the way, for years, we had the right going, triggered, trigger warning. Oh my God, the left, so easily triggered. Some hurty words. There are people being threatened with disciplinary action because their background on Microsoft Teams is a watermelon. Anyway, he told Novara this. This sets a precedent for external organisations dictating to the NHS, our public organisation, what to do, and for the NHS listening to these lobbyists rather than listening to the staff and the community itself. Baker, along with Whipps Cross respiratory consultant Dr. Arash Saleh and haematology registrar Dr. Sarah Ali, who previously worked at the Royal London, claim the updated policy amounts to indirect discrimination under the 2010 Equality Act. They say it unlawfully discriminates against those with anti-Zionist views. Baker has raised separate claims of direct discrimination and harassment. Dr. Arash Saleh, who is Jewish, told Novara Media this. The Trust essentially prioritised a pretty extremist pro-Israel lobby group, they are, above their own healthcare staff in drafting this policy and informing people about the policy. People in positions of authority have tried very hard to form a narrative that opposition to current Israeli actions and solidarity with Palestinians is tantamount to anti-Semitism against Jews. It's true, right? I don't want to see 16,000 kids dead. How could you be so anti-Semitic? He goes on to say the implication there is that Jews support what Israel is doing now, and not only do they support it, but they feel scared and harassed if people show opposition to it. For me, that's completely outrageous and a very anti-Semitic narrative because it's trying to tell the world that Jews will support this genocide, and that's absolutely not true. Well said. Dr. Saleh also pointed out the Trust had taken a very different approach to the war in Ukraine, saying this. It was clear that the attack on Ukraine was to be widely condemned, and it was not only acceptable for staff to display symbols, but solidarity was actively encouraged. The Trust put out a number of statements and even encouraged members of the Trust to send aid and form links with Ukraine. Crazy, right? Then suddenly, when it's Palestinians who've been killed and never before seen levels of suffering and violence, we suddenly have this urgent need for, quote, neutrality, for fear of upsetting people, for fear of being anti-Semitic if we voice opposition to genocide. The contrast between the two situations really raises the concern of institutional racism, and that's why we're challenging it. Good. It is. It is institutionally racist. Oh my God, Ukrainians, white Europeans are being killed in a war, by the way, an illegal war of aggression. Literally we had this in this country, literally send money to the front lines, Ukrainians fighting against the Russians. But don't you dare have a pin attached to your chest of a watermelon. People see the hypocrisy and the brazen double standard and how that is massively, massively pushed and propelled by a very powerful pro-Israel lobby in this country, which, by the way, doesn't give a toss about free speech. People see that and they get really angry about it. I know, because people come to me all the time. They're not even on the left. They say, I watch Novara Media. My God, what's going on in Gaza? I can't believe it. 5 years ago, I thought Israel was just a country like any other. Now, what a joke. Why do we let them have so much influence in our politics in this country? People say that to me every week who aren't on the left. It's quite extraordinary. Now, this isn't the first time UK Lawyers for Israel has targeted the NHS. In February 2023, the lawfare group successfully lobbied for artwork by Palestinian children to be taken down in Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. That's just one single hospital in Chelsea and Westminster. They said that plates decorated by the children made Jewish patients feel, quote, vulnerable, harassed, and victimized. They're plates painted by children. But you know what? If you don't think the kids deserve to live, and I don't know, I can't speak for them, but if you don't, you have no problem seemingly with 16,000 kids being killed. I don't know. You have to explain this to me. How does a child painting a plate going up on a wall make you feel harassed? You have to explain this to me. But nobody does explain it. Other health professionals have also come into UK Lawyers for Israel's crosshairs. Last month, the nutritionist was placed under investigation in order to remove a call to boycott Israeli dates from her website after lawyers complained to her professional body. Jesus Christ. Novara Media asked UK Lawyers for Israel for comment. They said this. Please see the article on our website dated 10th of March 2025. Take note of this quote from Dr. Amanjit Jund. Quote, UK LFI has received assurance from Dr. Amanjit Jund, Chief Executive Officer, Whips Cross University Hospital, that following a consultation process with our clinical leadership and union representatives, in line with our policy review and sign-off processes, and the revised policy will be going live this week, and will say our staff are expected not to be wearing or displaying political symbols, e.g. badges, lanyards, or clothing with political slogans, ideology, or national flag. The purpose of adopting a position of political neutrality is to foster an environment of inclusivity. A spokesperson for Barts Health NHS Trust said this. UKLFI raised complaints on behalf of a number of Jewish patients who wished to remain anonymous. At the time, we'd already commenced a review of our uniform policy in anticipation that we would be rolling out new NHS uniforms for our staff. Neither UKLFI nor any other external organisation was involved in this internal process, which included consultation with trade union representatives and staff networks. Our updated uniform policy states that staff are not expected to wear or display political symbols, including badges and slogans or flags, on clothing in order to uphold political neutrality, creating an inclusive culture at work and a safe space for patients in their time of need. During the final stages of policy governance, UKLFI sought an update on progress and promptly told the media that Palestinian symbols would be banned before we were able to communicate the full, even-handed policy to staff. We responded to the Ukraine invasion in alignment with the government's position at the time. What do you mean? What are you talking about? What, the government was telling people to share links to crowdfund things to send to Ukraine? What are you talking about? We responded to the Ukraine invasion in alignment with the government's position at the time, but on reflection, recognise that different circumstances demand a more nuanced approach. Our response to the conflict between Gaza and Israel sought to be balanced and focused on the well-being and support available to distressed staff on both sides. It's not about the staff. It's not even about the staff. It's about people wanting to say, I support peace. I don't want children to be killed. I don't support ethnic cleansing. I reject war crimes. A genocide happening in real time on my phone as we talk right now is horrific. If you cannot accept that, something's gone seriously wrong. Now, if I say war crimes, you might be thinking, well, we don't know there's war crimes. There are former Israeli prime ministers saying there are war crimes. The former spokesperson for Joe Biden, Miller. Remember that guy? He looks like Lucifer with his little grin. Looks like the Joker. He said there are war crimes. Just last month, the British Medical Association passed motions affirming that criticism of the actions of the state of Israel is not per se anti-Semitic, while also asserting the right of healthcare professionals and medical students to criticize states, governments, or institutions for actions that contravene international law. Where does it end? Helena, I'm going to give you a short time to reply, because this is just a crazy story. Be quick, because we've got to go to another story, and people are watching. But I know you want to say something about this, so please go ahead.
I mean, there's absolutely no issue with NHS Trust or any kind of business, or whatever it is, whether it's public or private, saying, for example, we do not want any political opinions being displayed upon people who are working, right? We are a non-political organisation, right? We want to maintain political neutrality. That's not a problem. As you pointed out, there's obviously this glaring hypocrisy when it comes to Ukraine versus Gaza in such similar situations. Like, do you think they would object, for example, if an Armenian flag because of what happened in the Nagorno-Karabakh, right? Like, those obviously would be continually different situations than the way in which they reacted with regards to people being pro-Palestine, right? And I would just say, if you're going to the NHS because you feel distressed or potentially harassed by a watermelon pin, right, you maybe should take yourself out of A&E and go and find a therapist. Because if you're harassed by this stuff, then quite frankly, you need help. You need help if you're being harassed by a watermelon pin, if you feel distressed by a watermelon pin, or indeed somebody saying, I think the war crimes are bad, right? But I think that the deeper meaning here, really, the deeper point, is the reason why these kind of things are happening, and what my personal opinion, is an incredibly kind of frivolous manner, is because people realize they're losing the argument. The ultra-Zionists who believe that the essentially Western position of a singular state of Israel with the Bantustans of Palestine, right? They always talk about two states, but they never actually push for it, Because again, right, there are plenty of pro-Palestinians who are two-state solutionists who do believe in a safe and secure Israel and a viable Palestinian state, right? But there's been members of UK LFI who've been in Parliament talk about how they think that there is a legal position for Israel being from the river to the sea, for example. We talked about it on this program previously. They can see the tides shifting. They can't convince people through rhetoric or through their positions in terms of the reality of the conflict or the dispute itself. So they have to resort to trying to silence people that they disagree with, or at least trying to move the dial in terms of representation of different opinions, because they know they're losing the argument and they can't win in the quote unquote battlefield of ideas. So they have to move towards using the law on their own ends to ensure that these pro-Palestinian voices get silenced. And you know what? Shows we're winning.
Unbelievable. But I just want to say really quickly, I'm half Iranian, okay? Almost 1,000 Iranians were killed recently in the 12-day war involving Israel. If I was out and there was an NHS worker with a Star of David or an Israel flag, I literally don't care. Oh, I don't feel safe, I'm being harassed. I don't care. It's a free country. It's a free country. It's meant to be a free country. That's why my dad is here. Meant to be a free country. Stop this. One of the biggest threats right now to free speech and freedom of association, freedom of political conscience in this country right now, despite all the bullshit that's come from the right over the last 10 years about the left, the censorious left, the woke censorious left, the biggest threat is from the Zionist lobby on free speech. I saw it firsthand with the Labour Party in the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. It's quite extraordinary.
Hello, welcome to IMO with me, Aaron Bastani. You can follow me on Twitter at Aaron Bastani. You can follow Novara Media on Twitter at Novara Media. Like, comment, and share this content under the hashtag IMO Bastani. Thanks for watching. So this week I want to talk about fully automated luxury communism.
That was a clip from one of the very first videos we published on Novara Media's YouTube channel 11 years ago. 11 years, how time flies. And how things have changed for us since then. Back in 2014, we had just a couple of hundred subscribers on YouTube, not a couple of 100,000, a couple of hundred. As of today, there's 1 million of you, all viewers who want reporting free from the stranglehold of the super rich. We are trying our best. 1 million subscribers. That's 11 Wembley stadiums, 5 Glastonburys, and 1 Birmingham. A whole city of 1 million people. Maybe we could call it Novaragrad. Welcome, comrades. It's even more remarkable when you think that Novara's entire video team could comfortably fit into a minibus just as long as Gary's driving. But of course, we didn't do it all alone. I certainly didn't do it all alone. Let's have a look at some other familiar faces. Who got us here?
Hello, welcome to the very first episode of OMFG Sarker. I'm Ash Sarker, your host, your spirit guide, your arch nemesis, or whatever.
I'm Michael Walker. This is The Fix.
I'm James Butler and this is Terms of Engagement.
All right, it's Novara Media. It's the eve of the election. Delighted to be joined by my boy Owen Jones.
Was it good? Here he is, Michael.
Here he is. What have you been up to today, babe?
So mate, it's a bit warm in here. Do you not want to take off your jacket?
The man's not hot.
Now it's time to meet the star of Swipe Left, Dahlia.
So Dahlia, welcome to Swipe Left. I can't see you, but I'm sure you look lovely. Does she look lovely? Oh, that was enthusiastic.
Ash Sarker has been running this campaign
I've not been running it, I've just been highly in favour.
to get me to nationalise Greggs. Look, I think Greggs are doing a good job at vegan sausages.
We have one final question, which is not from the audience. It's from the Novara Media backstage crew, who are amazing. Give them a big round of applause, actually. Which is that, in honour of your advice to Jeremy Corbyn, which is play really fucking hard when he's in negotiations with the EU, these are the Fug Life glasses. Which is going to make a nice thumbnail for this show. Yes, na. Okay.
Since then, we've covered 3 general elections, the rise, fall, and maybe resurrection of Corbynism, wars in Ukraine, Gaza, and Iran, the collapse of both Labour and the Tories, and the sudden rise of reform, and maybe even the Greens too. We've got our nightly news and politics show, Novara Live, our in-depth interview series Downstream, and reports on subjects ranging from the Socialist Rifle Association to the Birmingham bin strikes. So how did it all begin? Well, first, I like to celebrate in style. Right. That's it. I can hear you clapping. That's right, folks. I can hear you clapping. I'm going to give one to Gary, one to Stephen. Darren. Thank you. Stephen. Come on, Stephen, show your face. They call him the David Gandhi of Novara. Cheers. Cheers to your health and to Novara Media's 2 million subscribers. What, 20, maybe late 2026, 2027, who knows? That's actually pretty good. That's actually pretty good. So how do we start? I don't say this very often, actually. I was in a gym in 2010, and my friend comes along and says, Aaron, you're interested in politics. You like talking? I said, that's right. On both counts. And he said, well, you know, my friend runs a community radio station called Resonance FM. They broadcast on an FM frequency in London. Why don't you do a radio show with them on politics? I do that with James Butler, now a bigwig at the London Review of Books. He's too good for us now. And the rest is history. A little over a decade later, we've got 1 million subscribers on YouTube. We've got 1 million people on TikTok and Instagram together. 14,200 supporters. We do live events. We do articles. We do podcasts. We just did an event with a dude who finished 3rd in the French presidential election race in 2022, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. We've done events with the former finance minister of Greece. You know, we've spoken to Bernie Sanders. We've spoken to Francis Fukuyama, the dude who said history was over. I didn't expect all that in a gym in 2010. Helena, you're a more recent addition to Novara Media, albeit I must say a very, very welcome one. I think it's a real hallmark of our success at Novara that actually we can provide something of a platform to people like yourself, to Curtis, to others, all the new staff as well who've joined over the years. That to me is probably more gratifying than anything else, as a matter of fact. When did you first hear about Novara Media? And also, I suppose, as an appendage to that, when did you first decide to get involved in media production yourself?
Well, I can still remember the very first Novara Media video that I watched, which was the OMFG Sarkar video just after Brexit. Because there was that very specific clip that went viral of the guy saying the people are coming here and taking all the jobs and they're not even working, right? That was a really viral moment that really kind of catapulted Novara Media into the mainstream. I think a lot of us have matured since a lot of those debates then, but in some ways have become a lot more radical as well. And also I remember the second video I watched was one of the Shone This Ways that was posted, which was really, really good. Because that was a time when I was just kind of discovering myself as well, which was super interesting at the time. And I personally got involved in media during the pandemic, because we were all stuck at home. And I was just like, well, I feel like I've got lots to say. And yet there's no real space for this kind of stuff outside of places like Novara. So I throw my hat into the ring. The YouTube streaming, Twitch streaming, political sphere was kind of growing at the time. People like Hassan Pike who were bringing that. I thought, there's something that I can do myself. And, all it took was one phone call to Rachel Reeves. And here I am here today. And it's been incredible to watch the growth of Novara Media at a time when it's incredibly important. It's important that we have independent media. I mean, there's obviously a huge oligarchical stranglehold over the mainstream media, but that's breaking in terms of the level to which that it has its capture over the general public. Insofar as, you should expect the establishment opposition party from the form of the Conservatives to be continually in opposition. And yet we have this upstart party with their own kind of captured media organization doing their propaganda for them over at GB News. They've only got 1.8 million subscribers. We're not that far away from somewhere like GB News. And Nigel Farage gets loads of followers on TikTok. So we're seeing a real kind of changing of the guard in terms of the public's connection to media, and having a big independent left-wing media organization to try and combat the broader media slop that's getting pumped out from the right wing is going to be incredibly important as platforms like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok become the main point at which people, where millennials now especially, who are going to be the biggest voting cohort in the next decade, this is where they get the majority of their media from. And us being part of that space and having cultivated a huge part of this space over a long time is going to be incredibly important, which is why if you can spare a little bit of change every single month, you should go to novaramedia.com/support and help us reach the next million subscribers ASAP, because it's going to be incredibly important, because the fight is only just beginning. It all felt like it was over in 2019, and yet in just 5 years it feels like that we're really at another point of inflection.
Yeah, I think that's entirely on the money. I'm speaking to lots of people in the last couple of weeks, months, who were perhaps quite enthusiastic about Keir Starmer, some people with influence, profile, resources. And they recognise what's happening, right? They recognise this guy as a handmaid for a reform government and Nigel Farage being the Prime Minister. And they recognise we have 4 years to do something. Either you try and avert it and you have a left platform that can, achieve power, or you create a wider environment with regards to policy preferences, attitudes, etc., which is an alternative. We are trying to build an alternative here at Novara Media because there's literally no alternative, right? It's not, if we don't do it, the BBC will still be there and it'll be, offering liberal platitudes. That's over, okay? The choice is not between the status quo and something better. The choice is something better or something worse. We're trying to create something better here at Novara Media. We're trying to build a media for different politics, a people-powered politics. Thank you to Stephen for helping me on the show today. Thank you for Gary the OG. Our 1 million subscriber show, of course, Gary had to be producing it. Thank you to Helena. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Come back tomorrow for another live stream from 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Thank you for taking us to 1 million subscribers. Have a great weekend. Good night.